Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice Podcast channel. Tonight we step into a rainy evening on a cotton plantation in Mississippi in the year 1850, when the sky is low, the fields are dark, and the roof above you whispers with steady water. You hear drops striking wood and shingle, soft at first, then quicker, like fingertips on a table. Beyond the cabin door, cotton rows vanish into grey mist, and the air smells of wet earth, smoke, and something green crushed underfoot. What did warmth mean here, when comfort existed beside exhaustion? What did sleep feel like, when the night was never fully your own? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while the rain begins, leave a comment with your location and your local time, so we know where this quiet night finds you. Now, dim the lights and step carefully across the muddy yard, because the ground has softened beneath the long Mississippi rain. You feel the mud pull gently at your feet, thick and patient, as though the earth itself wants to slow you down. The evening is not yet black, but it has lost its shape, and the last colour of the day hides behind clouds. A line of cabins sits near the edge of the plantation grounds, simple, low, and close to one another. Their chimneys breathe smoke into the damp air, where it hangs instead of rising. You move toward one cabin whose doorway glows faintly with firelight. The roof is patched in places, and the rain finds every uneven board with delicate persistence. It is not a grand sound. It is smaller, closer, more intimate. The kind of sound that makes the whole world seem reduced to one room, one breath, one flickering flame. By 1850, Mississippi had become one of the central cotton-growing states in the American South. Cotton-shaped land, money, politics, and human lives with a force that was anything but gentle. Enslaved labour made that cotton wealth possible, and every row beyond the cabin carries that fact in silence. You do not need anyone to announce it. It is there in the cabins, the fields, the worn paths, and the tired shoulders around you. The cabin door opens with a wooden scrape. Warmth touches your face first, smoky and uneven, but deeply welcome after the wet air outside. You step in slowly, and your eyes adjust to the orange light of the hearth. Shadows lean against the walls. A pot rests near the fire, and steam lifts from it in pale threads, carrying the smell of cornmeal, greens, and wood smoke. The room is small, but it contains a whole evening. You notice rough boards underfoot, a few stools, bedding pushed near the wall, and clothes hung to dry where the smoke can reach them. The air feels heavy with damp wool, ash, and bodies close together. Rain taps overhead without stopping. It makes the cabin feel both fragile and enclosed. You stand just inside, listening. The sound of the storm changes from place to place. Near the door, it is sharp and cold. Near the hearth, it softens beneath crackling sticks and the slow breathing of people settling after labour. Somewhere outside, water runs from the roof edge and splashes into a shallow rut. This is shelter, but not ease. A plantation cabin in this world is built to contain people cheaply, not to honour their rest. Still, you feel how hands have made it more livable. A cloth has been folded with care. A small shelf holds a cup, a spoon, perhaps a bottle saved for some useful purpose. Someone has swept the floor, though mud keeps returning like an impolite guest. You lower yourself near the hearth, careful not to crowd the fire. The warmth reaches your knees first, then your hands. Your clothes hold the chill of rain, and the heat pulls it out slowly. The sensation is almost tender. Smoke stings your eyes a little, because chimneys in cabins like this do not always behave like polite architecture. A child shifts under a big blanket, watching the door as though the storm might enter. An older woman leans closer to the pot, stirring with a rhythm that seems older than the plantation itself. Her movements are economical, practiced, and calm. Calm can be a kind of labour too. You notice that here, outside, The cotton fields drink the rain. The plants are not in bloom during every season, of course, but their presence rules the land even when darkness hides them. In 1850, cotton was not merely a crop. It was an empire made of fibre, soil, credit, river transport, and forced labour. The mainstream fact rests heavily, yet the rain keeps falling with no concern for human systems. You hear the soft thud of someone placing a split log near the hearth. The log is damp at the end, and it hisses when flame touches it. Sparks lift and vanish. The cabin smells briefly sharper, resinous and green, and you imagine pine forests once standing where fields now stretch. Land has memory, even when people try to plough it flat. A quirky little detail finds you in the corner of the room. A gourd dipper hangs from a peg, polished by use until it shines faintly in firelight. Gourds were practical things, grown, dried, hollowed, and turned into cups, bowls, ladles, and containers. So, yes, in a room where so much has been taken, even a humble gourd becomes technology. History is full of such quiet inventions. The rain grows steadier, it presses the roof, slides down the walls, and gathers beneath the cabin. You can smell damp clay through the cracks. Some cabins had wooden floors, while others used packed earth, and conditions varied widely by plantation wealth, region, and the decisions of enslavers. Historians still argue whether descriptions from visitors can be trusted fully. Since many observers softened what they saw, you notice how the people inside understand the room without looking. They know where the roof leaks in a hard storm. They know which board complains under weight. They know how close to sit to the fire without scorching a sleeve. These are not small things. They are the map of survival. The cabin's warmth gathers around ankles and hands, but the corners remain cool. You feel that unevenness as part of the night. Heat is not distributed generously here. It must be coaxed, guarded, and shared. A blanket is moved closer to a child. A stool is shifted away from a drip forming near the wall. Someone mutters softly about the roof, with just enough dry humour to make the room breathe. Gentle sarcasm belongs to the tired, perhaps more than anyone else. When life offers a leaking roof, sometimes the only polite response is to give the leak a personality. You hear a low remark about how the rain must be visiting kin, since it knows exactly where to come in. A few smiles appear, brief as sparks. You sit with those smiles, careful not to make them larger than they are. This is not a cosy fantasy. It is a human room under pressure. Yet within pressure, people still notice warmth, taste, sound, and one another. That is not contradiction. That is life insisting on texture. The storm muffles distant sounds from the main house and work buildings. The plantation becomes a world of separate islands, each lit by fire, each breathing smoke. You imagine other cabins nearby, with their own pots, their own tired conversations, their own dripping roofs. Rain makes the distance feel strange. It hides and connects at the same time. Your fingertips brush the rough edge of a wooden stool. It has splinters worn smooth by repeated hands. Touch matters in this dimness. The grain of wood, the heat of a cup, the scratch of homespun cloth, the cool damp at the hem of clothing, all of it keeps you present. The past is not only dates and documents, it is also texture. A low voice speaks near the fire, not loudly, because walls are thin and caution is habit. The voice mentions the rain with practical concern. Rain can delay certain field tasks, but it can also make tomorrow harder. Mud clings to tools and feet. Wet cotton can spoil if timing is wrong. Weather is never just scenery on a plantation. It is part of labour, discipline, hunger, and hope. The fire pops and everyone pauses by instinct. Then the room settles again. A spoon scrapes the pot. A child coughs once. Outside, a mule makes a distant sound, low and unhappy. The rain answers everything in the same soft language. You begin to understand how night changes the plantation without freeing it. Darkness covers the fields, but not the rules. Rain softens the paths, but not the system. The cabin holds warmth, but also crowding, smoke, and worry. Still, warmth is real. You feel it on your palms as you hold them toward the flame. The older woman lifts the pot slightly and adjusts it away from the hottest coals. Her face shines with firelight and sweat. The smell thickens, earthy and plain, but comforting in the way hot food can be. Hunger makes flavors sharper. Fat, salt, corn, greens, and smoke become an evening vocabulary. The room listens to supper before supper is served. You hear rain on the roof, rain in the yard, rain in the chimney's draught. Each sound has its own small place, above you. It patters quickly. Beside the wall, it drips with patient pauses. Outside the door, it falls into mud with soft, wet taps. The whole night seems to breathe through water. Somewhere in the room, a piece of cloth is wrung out by hand. The sound is small but vivid. Water twists from fabric and lands in a bowl. The cloth smells of rain, sweat, and smoke, all braided together. Nothing here is separate for long. Work enters rest. Weather enters clothing. Field enters cabin. You look again at the doorway. Beyond it, the yard is a dark shine. The cabins stand close, but the rain makes each threshold feel private. A figure passes briefly outside, carrying something under a cloth. The person moves with the careful balance of someone protecting dry goods from a sky that has no manners at all. Inside, the fire brightens as a new stick catches. Light climbs the wall and shows the cabin's imperfections. Gaps between boards have been stuffed where possible. The roofline sags slightly. A peg holds a hat. Another holds a small bag. You wonder what is inside it, and the wondering feels almost too personal. Privacy is scarce in a one-room cabin. Even thoughts must learn to move quietly. Yet people create small boundaries with posture, silence, folded cloth, and the placing of belongings. A corner can become yours for a moment. A cup can carry memory. A song can hold a country that no map in the big house acknowledges. The rain cools the world outside, but the cabin grows warmer. Smoke curls, changes direction, and makes everyone blink. You shift, and the floor answers with a tired creak. Your body begins to accept the room. The first discomfort becomes familiar. The smell of smoke settles into your hair. The rhythm overhead lowers your breathing. This is how the night gathers you in, not gently exactly, but completely. You're not invited into ease. You're invited into attention. You notice how firelight turns ordinary objects sacred for a moment. You notice how rain can make hardship sound almost musical, which feels unfair and beautiful at once. The plantation beyond the door remains vast, ordered and watchful. But this cabin, for these minutes, holds its own centre of gravity. It is made of pine, clay, labour, worry, and warmth. It is made of people who know how to stretch a fire, share a meal, and keep voices low when necessary. The rain continues, and the roof keeps answering. You sit near the hearth as steam rises from the pot, and the first bowl is prepared. The air is smoky, close, and alive with small sounds. Outside, Mississippi darkness folds over the fields. Inside, the cabin glows like an ember held against the storm. You stand inside the cabin and let your eyes travel over the walls, because walls speak when people cannot. They do not speak loudly, of course. They whisper through gaps, stains, patched corners, and the places where hands have tried to improve what little was given. The boards are rough pine, cut and fitted with more usefulness than comfort in mind. Some seams have been packed with clay, moss, cloth, or whatever could keep wind from slipping through too freely. The rain touches the outside of the cabin like 1,000 soft fingers. Inside, the wall nearest the storm feels cool when you place your palm against it. The wood is not smooth. It catches lightly against your skin, reminding you that this building was made quickly, cheaply, and with limits placed on every nail. Shelter exists here, but it is shelter with conditions. That seems to be the entire plantation. Really? You notice the cabin is small enough that every movement matters. A person crossing the room must step around bedding, stools, a low chest, a cooking pot, and other people's knees. There is no hallway where sound can vanish. There is no private chamber where grief or laughter can close a door. The room holds every breath, every cough, every sigh, and every sleepy complaint from a child. In many parts of the Cotton South, enslaved families lived in single-room cabins built in rows called quarters. Some cabins housed one family, while others held several people whose family ties might be strained by sale, labour assignment, or plantation rules. That is one of the plain historical facts resting beneath the roof. Housing was not only about sleep, it was also about control, surveillance, labour efficiency, and the cheap maintenance of bodies. The floor beneath you may be plank, but it might also be packed earth in poorer cabins. Tonight, it feels firm in the centre and softer near the edges, where dampness gathers like an unwanted guest. The smell of wet clay rises gently, mixing with smoke, old ash, and the earthy scent of clothing drying too close to the hearth. Your nose grows used to it slowly. Then it becomes the smell of the room itself. You hear the rain more clearly near the walls. It slides down the outer boards and taps against something loose outside. A shutter, perhaps. A split length of wood. A tool left leaning where it should not be, because exhaustion does not always tidy up after itself. Every little sound seems large inside a room this close. The cabin turns weather into music, though not always by choice. The roof is low enough to make the room feel held down. Heat collects near the rafters, while cooler air waits near your ankles. Smoke curls along the ceiling before it finds its way toward the chimney, taking its own sweet time, as smoke often does when it wants to be dramatic. Your eyes sting a little. Nobody makes much of it. A little smoke indoors is not an event here. It is simply part of breathing. You look toward the chimney, built of clay, sticks, or rough brick, depending on materials and plantation investment. The hearth is the centre of warmth, cooking, light, conversation, and danger. Sparks can leap, embers can roll, a poorly built chimney can draw badly and fill a room with smoke. Still, without the fire, the cabin would be damp darkness, so the fire is both friend and nuisance, which is very typical of useful things. Near the hearth, the wall is darker from years of smoke. The stain climbs upward in a soft black bloom. You can see where soot has settled into cracks. You imagine hands wiping the area, not because it can ever become clean in any fancy sense, but because people keep trying. That effort matters. It is a form of dignity made with cloth, water, and stubbornness. A small shelf catches your attention. It holds a few objects placed with surprising care. A cup, a folded scrap, a bit of string, maybe a broken comb with missing teeth. Nothing looks valuable in the way an inventory clerk might understand value, yet every item has a job, a memory, or a reason for staying. In a world where belongings can be inspected, taken, or lost, keeping anything personal becomes meaningful. One quirky detail belongs to the spaces between logs and boards. People sometimes used mud mixed with straw, grass, hair, or moss to seal cracks in rough cabins. It was not elegant, unless your idea of elegance is stopping winter wind with whatever nature and patience provide. Honestly, that kind of elegance deserves more respect. A wall packed by tired hands can be more impressive than a polished parlour nobody needed. You bend closer to a seam between boards. The clay there has dried unevenly, cracked, and been pressed again. The surface bears fingerprints softened by time. You cannot know whose fingers shaped it, but you can feel the intimacy of that contact. A repair is never just repair in a place like this. It is a conversation between need and weather. Rain makes the room shrink. The darkness beyond the door presses inward, and the cabin answers with warmth, smoke, and human closeness. You become aware of every shoulder, every sleeve, every movement made to avoid stepping on someone's bedding. Crowding is not merely uncomfortable. It changes how people rest, speak, argue, forgive, and dream. Even silence must learn to share space. The bedding is plain, perhaps a mattress stuffed with corn shucks, straw, moss, or rough ticking. You can imagine the feel of it under your hand, uneven and dry where protected, slightly musty where damp air has crept in. Thin blankets lie folded or pulled close around children. Cloth is precious, and warmth is organised carefully. Nothing is wasted except, perhaps, the opinions of the person who designed the roof. The walls hold more than cold outside. They hold sound. A laugh from a nearby cabin might travel through wet evening air, softened by rain. A cry might travel too. A whispered prayer could hide beneath the storm, while a song hummed low might settle into the cracks. Architecture shapes listening. On plantations, listening could be tender, practical, or dangerous, depending on who heard and why. Scholars still debate how much privacy enslaved households could truly maintain inside plantation quarters. Some argue that cabin life allowed important family and cultural spaces beyond enslavers' constant view. Others point out that distance, patrols, work routines, and housing arrangements kept those spaces under pressure. You feel both truths in the room. The walls protect, and the walls fail. They comfort, and they expose. A child runs a finger along a wet line beneath one board, then wipes it on a cloth. The gesture is ordinary, almost bored. Children become familiar with buildings the way they become familiar with weather. They know where not to sit during rain. They know which corner smells cold. They know which sleeping spot gets smoke when the wind changes. Childhood here includes knowledge no child should need. And yet children learn. The cabin's furniture is sparse, but its arrangement is intelligent. A chest may serve as storage, seat, and boundary. A stool may move from hearth to doorway and back again. Hooks along the wall hold hats, cloth bags, tools, or cooking things. The whole room is a puzzle solved every night. You admire the practical geometry of it, because survival often has excellent spatial awareness. You feel the warmth from the fire on one side of your face, while the other side remains cool. This uneven comfort becomes a physical fact. You turn slightly, then turn back, sharing heat with the room rather than claiming it. Someone shifts a pot lid. Steam rolls out and touches the smoky air. The scent is simple, but it fills the cabin with the promise of being held together a little longer. Outside, rainwater runs off the roof in streams. The roof might be made of wooden shingles, boards, or other available material, depending on the plantation and region. Wherever the covering is thin or poorly laid, the drops find weakness. Water is patient. It enters through neglect with the confidence of someone who knows nobody asked its opinion. The cabin answers with bowls, rags, and practiced annoyance. You notice that the door is not merely an entrance. It is a weather line, a social line, and a line of risk. Open it, and cold dampness enters. Close it, and smoke thickens. Leave it unbarred, and the night feels less safe. Bar it too firmly, and you remember that control over movement is never fully yours here. Even a door can carry politics, which seems rude of a door, but there it is. The room's atmosphere thickens as evening deepens. Firelight lifts and falls across the wall, revealing knots in the pine like dark eyes. Shadows stretch over hanging cloth. The sound of rain becomes steadier, less dramatic, almost hypnotic. Your shoulders loosen despite the hard truths around you. The body sometimes accepts warmth before the mind can accept the world. You breathe in smoke, damp wood, clay, and simmering food. You feel rough floorboards through your shoes and heat drying the rain from your clothing. You hear someone outside call softly, then the quick slap of footsteps crossing mud. The cabin receives each sound, judges it, and settles again. Nothing here is empty background. Everything has meaning, because everything might matter. A corner near the hearth has been swept smooth. It may be the cleanest place in the room, protected by habit more than by architecture. You notice how care gathers there. A folded blanket, a small basket, a tool placed where it will be found in darkness. These arrangements do not erase hardship. They reveal the people living through it, shaping what they can touch. The walls continue holding their mixed messages. They are poor walls, yes, but they are not meaningless. They carry repairs, smoke, warmth, scratches, and memory. They divide inside from outside, not perfectly, but enough for a fire to glow and voices to lower. They make a room where people can sit together while rain darkens the fields. You let your hand rest once more against the pine. It is cool now, though the hearth burns near your knees. The cabin is not still. It creaks, breathes, leaks, warms, and listens. It is both shelter and evidence. It tells you what was denied, what was endured, and what was quietly made livable by hands history too often refused to name. The rain keeps tracing the roof. The fire keeps testing the shadows around you. The cabin gathers its people into one smoky pocket of heat, roughness, closeness, and patience. You sit inside that narrow warmth, feeling how a wall can be thin and still matter, how a room can be crowded and still contain worlds. You sit close enough to feel the hearth warming your shins, while supper slowly becomes the centre of the room. The pot gives off a low, steady breath, and each bubble rises with patient purpose. Steam folds into the smoke overhead, then drifts back down with the smell of cornmeal, greens, salt, and ash. The rain continues over the roof, but hunger changes how you hear it. The whole cabin seems to wait between the soft tapping above and the quiet simmering below. A woman bends near the fire and shifts the pot with a wrapped hand. The cloth is thick from use, browned at the edges, and damp where steam has touched it. You feel the heat when the pot moves, sudden and close, like a warm animal passing by. Someone reaches for a wooden bowl. Someone else breaks a small piece from a cake of cornbread and sets it aside for a child. Supper begins through gestures, not announcements. The food is simple because it has to be. On many plantations, enslaved people received weekly rations that often included cornmeal and salted pork, with amounts varying by region, season, and the will of the enslaver. Those rations were rarely generous enough to make life easy. People stretched them through skill, gardens, hunting, fishing, trading, and the old genius of making a little act larger than it looks. You watch a hand scatter something into the pot. It might be pepper, dried herbs, or a pinch of something saved in a twist of paper. The gesture is small, almost secretive. Flavour becomes a quiet rebellion against plain survival, not a loud one. Not the kind that gets a painting in a museum, more the kind that gets everyone through another wet evening with a warmer mouth. The bowl comes to you warm on the outside, rough against your palms. It has been used so often that its rim feels slightly uneven. You raise it carefully and breathe in the steam. The smell is humble, but it carries depth from smoke and long cooking. Your fingers relax around the heat. Rain chills the world beyond the door, while this bowl gathers one small weather system of its own. A child watches the serving with wide attention. Children learn fairness early in rooms where every spoonful matters. The first portion, the last scrape, the softest bit, the crust from the edge, all of it has meaning. A tired adult may pretend not to want much, which fools absolutely no one. Still, the bowl passes. Care moves through the room, disguised as rationing. The cornbread is coarse, slightly gritty, and warm enough to steam when broken. You feel crumbs fall against your fingers. Some pieces are dipped into the pot, catching liquid and bits of greens. The taste is smoky, salty, earthy, and plain. Yet plain food after labour can feel almost grand. Hunger is a dramatic cook. and it never asks permission to season everything. Near the hearth, someone speaks softly about the garden patch behind a cabin. Many enslaved families cultivated small plots when allowed, growing vegetables, herbs, or other foods that expanded their diets. These gardens could offer nourishment, pride, and sometimes goods for small trade. They were also squeezed into the scraps of time left after forced work. Even the cabbage had to understand scheduling. Apparently, the rain thickens for a moment, tapping harder on the roof. Conversation pauses as everyone listens. A leak begins somewhere near the wall, landing in a steady drip. No one rises immediately. Supper outranks the leak, at least for a little while. The room accepts this decision with the weary logic of people who know water will still be there in a minute. You notice a small bundle hanging above the hearth. Dried leaves tied with string. It may be herbs, peppers, or something gathered from field edges. A quirky tidbit settles quietly in the firelight. Enslaved cooks and families sometimes preserved flavourings by drying, smoking, pickling, or tucking small seasonings away in cloth, gourds, or jars. A tiny pepper could change a whole pot. That is a very respectable amount of power for something so small. Food carries memory even when the ingredients are limited. You sense it in the way hands move without measuring. A pinch here, a stir there, a pause to judge the thickness by sound. These methods were not written on paper in most cabins, but they lived in bodies, voices, and repetition. Knowledge entered the pot through muscle memory. The spoon became a teacher. The hearth snaps, and a brief red spark jumps onto the ash. Someone taps it back with the end of a stick. The ash smells dry and bitter under the richer scent of supper. Smoke brushes your face, and your eyes water again. There is nothing graceful about blinking through smoke while trying to eat. History, once again, refuses to be as tidy as bookshelves suggest. The older people eat more slowly. The children eat with concentration. You feel the difference between eating for pleasure and eating because the body must be persuaded to continue. Yet pleasure still appears. A softened green, a warm crust, a spoonful with more flavour than expected. A shared look when the pot turns out better than anyone had reason to hope. Historians continue to disagree about how much variation existed in plantation diets across Mississippi and the wider South. Some records emphasize standard rations controlled by enslavers, while other evidence shows hunting, fishing, gardens, markets, and community exchange widening what people actually ate. The truth likely lived unevenly across places. You can feel that uncertainty in the bowl, where necessity and creativity meet. A man near the doorway tears bread and lowers his head over the food, letting steam warm his face. His sleeves are damp at the cuffs. Mud has dried in pale patches on his trousers. The smell of wet cloth rises whenever he shifts. He eats without hurry, though perhaps hurry has simply been used up for the day. Rain softens his outline in the firelight. Someone laughs quietly when a child asks for the best part of the pot, as though the pot has been hiding treasure. The answer comes dry and gentle. The best part is the part you get before your brother sees it. The child considers this wisdom with grave seriousness. In the cabin, humour does not erase hunger, but it gives hunger some competition. You take another mouthful. The texture is thick, with bits that resist and soften slowly. Your tongue finds salt, smoke, and green bitterness. Outside, water drums on packed earth. Inside, the bowl warms your palms until your fingers almost ache from the change. The body loves heat when rain has been touching it all evening. The serving continues with careful attention. Scraps are not treated as scraps. A bone, a rind, a spoonful of pot liquor, a crust too hard for one mouth but useful in broth. All of it remains valuable. Waste is a luxury, and luxury is not spending the night here. This room understands the full career of food, from field to pot to crumb. You think of cotton beyond the cabin, though not as scenery. Cotton took time from food, Cotton demanded bodies that also needed feeding. Cotton wealth travelled outward, while meals like this were made from what could be kept, grown, stretched, or salvaged. The connection is not poetic, it is practical and severe. A crop can dominate a landscape so completely that even supper has to negotiate with it. Still, the people around the hearth bring their own knowledge to the meal. African, indigenous, European, and regional food traditions mingled across the South in complicated ways, often under brutal conditions. Techniques of stewing greens, seasoning with smoke, making breads from corn, and using every edible part became part of daily survival. Culture was not preserved in comfort alone. Sometimes it was preserved in a pot watched carefully beside a smoky fire. The spoon scrapes the bottom. That sound changes the mood slightly. It is not disappointment exactly, because the meal has done what it could. It is more like a small bell marking the limit of abundance. The pot is tilted. The last liquid is divided. Someone wipes the inside with bread, practical and precise. The bowl shines briefly in firelight. Rainwater runs outside in little channels. The smell of the yard enters when the door opens a crack, bringing wet soil, animal scent, and cool air. A person steps in quickly with a covered pail, then shuts the weather out again. The fire leans in the draught, then steadies. Everyone feels the cold interruption and the returning warmth. You hold your bowl after finishing, reluctant to let go of its heat. The wood is no longer hot, only warm, like a memory fading in your hands. Around you, people shift into the quiet after eating. A full stomach is not guaranteed, but even partial fullness changes the room. Voices soften, shoulders drop. A child grows heavier against a blanket. The pot is not abandoned once empty. It must be cleaned, scraped, saved from rust, and made ready for use again. Cookware in a cabin is not decoration. It is survival equipment with soot on its sides and history in its dents. A cracked pot can be a crisis. A good pot can serve longer than many promises made by powerful men, which is not a high moral bar, but still worth noting. The woman at the hearth pours a little water into the pot, and steam rises with a sharp hiss. The sound fills the room, sudden and satisfying. She swirls it carefully, loosening what clings. The smell changes from supper to wet iron and smoke. Your fingertips feel sticky with crumbs. You rub them together and brush them clean. You sense how the meal has arranged everyone, not only physically but emotionally. Hunger had gathered them sharply. Eating has loosened the edges. The storm remains outside, and the rules of the plantation remain everywhere. But supper has created a brief circle of warmth. It is not freedom. It is not plenty. It is a human interval. And those matter. A low conversation begins while bowls are wiped and stacked. Someone mentions a neighbour's turnip greens. Someone else answers with mild envy, the sleepy kind that has no energy for true complaint. There is talk of whether the rain will spoil some task or spare the body for a few hours. Nobody fully trusts weather. Weather has too much personality. The child who wanted the best part now fights sleep with heroic failure. The little head dips, rises, then dips again. A hand steadies the bowl before it slips. The room smiles without making much noise. Firelight flickers across tired faces, and the rain gives everything a blurred edge. The atmosphere becomes thick, warm, and almost drowsy. You breathe slowly and taste smoke at the back of your throat. Supper lingers in the air, mixed with damp clothing, ash, and the clean mineral smell of rain. Your hands rest open near your knees. The bowl has been taken away. The pot sits dark beside the hearth, emptied but not useless, waiting for whatever the next day asks of it. For now, the cabin holds the afterglow of food, not abundance, not comfort without cost, but nourishment made carefully under pressure. You listen as the last spoon is set down. The sound is small, final, and strangely peaceful. Above it, rain keeps tapping the roof, steady as a lullaby that has learned to live with hunger. You watch the room change its purpose once the bowls are set aside. Supper has warmed the body, but the evening is not finished with anyone. The fire still glows, the rain still taps, and hands begin finding work in the dimness. A needle appears from a folded scrap of cloth. A shirt is turned toward the light. A child's foot is checked for a sore place, and someone reaches for a rag. Night does not mean idleness here. It only means labour becomes quieter. During slavery, many tasks needed for family survival happened outside the official workday, especially cooking, cleaning, mending, childcare, washing, and tending small belongings. The field may release the body for a while, but the body returns to a room full of needs. That is a rather rude arrangement, yet no one asks the arrangement for permission to endure it. You sit near enough to see a needle flashing faintly in the firelight. The motion is small and controlled. In, pull, tighten, smooth. In, pull, tighten, smooth. Each stitch holds cloth together against another day of wear. The thread is not wasted. It is pulled carefully and measured by habit and knotted close. Fabric is too precious for careless hands, especially when the plantation provides little and demands much. The shirt being repaired is rough against the fingers. It smells of rain, sweat, smoke, and field dust that water has not fully removed. A tear along the sleeve has widened from work, catching perhaps on a cotton stalk, a fence edge, or a tool handle. The repair will not make it new, it will make it useful. In this room, useful is often the higher blessing. The rain deepens outside, beating a little harder against the roof. A drip begins near the far corner, and this time someone rises. A small bowl is placed beneath it with a practiced movement. The first drops strike hollow wood. Plink, plink, plink. The sound joins the hearth, the needle, and a child's breathing. The cabin becomes an orchestra with very limited funding. You feel the damp at your cuffs as your clothing dries unevenly. The part nearest the fire becomes warm and stiff. The part turned away remains cold. You shift, and the change makes your skin prickle. The room smells more strongly now of drying cloth. It has a sour, smoky, woolly scent. Not pleasant exactly, but honest. Everything here announces its history through smell. A woman lifts a child's leg gently and wipes mud from the ankle. The child complains in a sleepy voice, less from pain than from the insult of being cleaned. The rag is damp and cool. The heel is examined, then rubbed with care. Small injuries matter. A blister can become a problem when tomorrow requires walking, standing, bending, and carrying under watchful eyes. You hear the soft scrape of a comb through hair. The sound is slow and careful, followed by a tiny hiss from the child enduring it. Hair care could be practical, social, and deeply personal for enslaved people, carrying traditions of grooming, beauty, family attention, and cultural memory. Even under harsh restrictions, such care created moments of touch and identity. A braid could be warmth, order, affection, and art all at once. On a peg near the wall hangs a small cloth bag. Someone takes it down, feels inside, and removes a button saved from some ruined garment. A quirky little truth sits inside that gesture. Buttons, bits of bone, string, pins, thread, and cloth scraps could become treasures in households where replacement was uncertain. A broken thing was often not finished. It was simply waiting for a new assignment. The button is held toward the fire and inspected. It might not match the garment perfectly. But perfection has not been invited tonight. The needle goes through the cloth, then through the buttonholes, then back again. Each pass is steady. The hand doing the work is tired, but not careless. You can almost feel the concentration in the air, quiet and firm. Someone near the doorway shakes mud from a pair of shoes or coarse work brogans. The sound is dull against the threshold. Wet leather smells sharp, and the mud clings as though personally offended by removal. Footwear is placed near the warmth, but not too close. Too much heat can ruin leather. Even drying something requires judgment, because the fire is helpful right up until it becomes destructive. A basin appears beside the hearth, and water is poured with a heavy glug. The water has the chill of outside storage. Steam does not rise until a warmed cloth enters it. Hands wash quickly, then carefully. Soap, when available, could be harsh, homemade, scarce, or saved for particular needs. Cleanliness here is not the tidy fantasy of a whitewashed room. It is effort against mud, sweat, insects, illness, and smoke. Historians still debate how enslaved families balance plantation demands with private domestic labour in different regions and seasons. Some accounts suggest that nights and Sundays allowed vital family work, market activity, and religious gathering. Other evidence shows that enslavers often intruded on even these limited hours. The uncertainty does not feel distant. You can sense it in every hurried stitch and every lowered voice. The fire begins to settle into coals. Someone nudges a stick inward, and sparks brighten briefly. Light rises across the walls, showing shadows bent over tasks. The room has become quieter, but not still. A needle moves, cloth folds, water drips. A child sighs. A woman hums under her breath, so softly that the tune is almost more vibration than sound. You listen to that hum without trying to catch it fully. It moves around the work, not above it. The melody seems shaped for low rooms, smoky corners, and ears close enough to understand. It is not performance, it is company. The rain carries its own rhythm overhead, and for a moment the hum and weather seem to agree on something private. Near your knee, a bundle of laundry waits for better drying. Some pieces have been rinsed in cold water, some merely brushed, and some held back because there is not enough time, soap, or strength. Washing clothing could be exhausting work, especially when water had to be hauled and fabric scrubbed by hand. The night may be gentle in sound, but its chores have hard knuckles. A child is moved closer to the warmest place without waking fully. The blanket scratches softly across the floor. The small body curls by instinct, seeking heat. Someone tucks cloth around the child's shoulder, then pauses to smooth the hair from the forehead. The gesture lasts only a second. It contains more tenderness than any speech could politely manage. You notice the way adults keep working while watching children. Their eyes move without turning their heads. A cough is noticed. A restless foot is noticed. A child reaching too close to the hearth is stopped by a hand before the danger becomes dramatic. This is care as constant awareness. It is exhausting, invisible, and magnificent. Outside, the rain loosens dirt from the yard. You imagine the paths becoming slick, puddles collecting near doorways, and ashes turning to paste where they have been thrown out. Inside, a rag wipes the threshold. It will not stay clean long. Everyone knows this. The wiping still happens. Cleanliness does not require victory to be worth attempting. A mended cloth is folded and placed near a sleeping spot. A loose thread is bitten off. The tiny snap of teeth on thread sounds surprisingly final. Another garment is lifted. The next repair begins. There is no ceremony around it. The work enters the hands, and the hands obey. You feel your own shoulders grow heavy from watching, as though attention itself has weight. The cabin's air is thick now, with heat near the fire and dampness along the walls. Your skin feels both warmed and chilled, depending on which way you turn. Smoke presses lightly against your throat. The smell of wet wool has softened into the smell of drying wool. Rain keeps the roof talking. Every sense is occupied, but nothing shouts. Someone checks a small store of kindling. Dry pieces are guarded like little sticks of future comfort. The best ones are kept away from the damp. A child might be sent to gather chips on another day, or someone may save splinters from repair work. Firewood is not simply wood. It is light, heat, cooking, safety, and time. Naturally, it also makes splinters, because helpful things enjoy causing problems. You see a hand rub oil or grease into cracked skin, field work, washing, cold water, and rough cloth can open painful lines across knuckles and palms. The touch is slow and firm. The smell is faint, animal and smoky. Hands are tools here, but they are also beloved. Though no plantation record would bother saying so, the record would count labour. The cabin knows touch. A small prayer may be murmured near the hearth, or perhaps it is only a thought with sound attached. You cannot quite tell. Religious life among enslaved people in Mississippi and elsewhere could include Christian worship. African spiritual continuities, secret meetings, songs, and practices adapted under surveillance. Belief might be public, private, borrowed, transformed, or guarded. The room leaves space for that uncertainty. The needlework slows as eyes tire. Firelight is not generous to fine detail. Someone leans closer, then back, blinking. The thread misses the eye of the needle once, twice, and finally passes through. A soft chuckle follows. The needle has won 2 rounds and lost the third. There is no applause, sadly, though perhaps it deserves some. You feel the room preparing itself for sleep through work, not by stopping suddenly. Things are set where hands can find them in darkness. The pot is placed safely. Shoes are turned soles down. Wet cloth is lifted from the floor. Children are tucked tighter. A tool is moved away from the path between bedding and door. Order gathers quietly, piece by piece. The rain softens again, returning to a gentle tapping. The bowl under the leak is emptied and replaced. A damp patch darkens the floor beneath it. Someone sighs, but not with surprise. The cabin is known, leak by leak. Its weaknesses have names, habits, moods, and favourite tricks. You almost expect someone to scold the roof like an unreliable cousin. A final garment is folded. The mender presses the seam flat with her thumb, testing the strength of the repair. It holds. For tonight, that is enough. The work has not transformed the world, but it has defended the morning from one more unravelling. Sometimes survival looks exactly like a seam that does not split. You sit in the dim warmth and feel the room exhale. The chores have thinned, though they never truly disappear. The fire sinks lower. The children grow still. The smell of smoke settles into everything, including your thoughts. Outside, the rain washes the dark yard and taps the roof with steady patience. Inside, tired hands rest at last, open and quiet in the firelight. You hear the first story begin so quietly that it seems to rise from the hearth itself. No one announces it. No one clears a grand space for it. A voice simply enters the room, low and warm, while rain softens the roof above you. The children grow still, because children understand the arrival of a tale faster than adults admit. Even the fire seems to settle and listen, which is very dramatic behaviour for a pile of coals. The storyteller sits where the light catches one cheek and leaves the other in shadow. The face is tired, but the voice is awake. It moves slowly at first, testing the room, choosing its path. You feel the change in the cabin immediately. The walls remain rough, the floor remains damp in places, and the smoke still stings your throat. Yet the room becomes larger than its boards. A tale can do that. It can stretch a cabin until it contains forests, rivers, old countries, clever animals, foolish masters, lost mothers, dangerous roads, and impossible escapes. It can make the smallest room hold an entire world. On plantations across the South, oral storytelling carried entertainment, memory, instruction, humour, and coded wisdom. It also helped communities preserve meaning under conditions designed to reduce people to labour. The voice speaks of a rabbit, perhaps, or a spider, or some small creature with more nerve than strength. The children recognise the shape of the story and lean into it. Trickster tales were common in many African and African American traditions, with figures who used wit to survive against stronger enemies. The lesson is not subtle, but it is clever enough to wear a smile. History often travels better when disguised as mischief. You smell smoke and damp cloth while the words move around you. The storyteller's hands rest still for a moment, then begin to shape the air. A finger bends like a branch. A palm opens like a road. The tale is not only spoken, it is acted softly, with shoulders, eyebrows, pauses, and a sudden glance toward the door when danger appears in the plot. The rain becomes part of the telling. When the story reaches a river, the roof sounds wetter. When the hero hides, the shadows thicken along the wall. When the foolish, powerful character is tricked, a small laugh moves through the room. It is quickly controlled, but not erased. Quiet laughter has its own strength. It knows how to survive thin walls. A child asks a question in a whisper. The storyteller answers without breaking the rhythm, guiding the child back into the tale. This is how memory teaches without sitting anyone at a desk. The story carries practical warnings, social wisdom, and a taste for justice, all wrapped in a rabbit's ridiculous confidence. Honestly, if a rabbit can outthink the mighty, perhaps the night deserves some hope. You notice that the adults are listening too. Their faces do not show the open wonder of the children, but their attention is deep. The story gives them a space where the powerful can be foolish, the trapped can be clever, and the small can live to trouble the large another day. It is not escape from reality. It is reality turned sideways, so the hidden pattern can be seen. A mainstream historical truth rests inside this quiet hour. Enslaved communities preserved and reshaped cultural traditions through oral histories, religious songs, work songs, lullabies, jokes, proverbs, and family memory. These traditions varied by region, origin, plantation, and generation. They were never frozen relics. They changed as people changed, carrying traces of Africa, the Americas, Christianity, local experience, and daily necessity. The storyteller pauses to feed the fire a small stick. The flame brightens and shows the children's eyes shining. Outside, water drips from the eaves with a steady rhythm. Inside, the air feels thick with listening. You sense how rare it is to be held by a voice without being ordered by one. A gentle voice can become shelter when other voices bring command. The story turns. The clever creature has stolen something, hidden something, or escaped a trap by pretending to be weaker than he is. The room almost smiles before the words arrive. Everyone knows the powerful rarely imagine the smaller thinking. That, of course, is often their first mistake. The storyteller lets the foolish character boast just long enough for the cabin to enjoy it. A quirky detail glows in the tale's corner. Some folklorists later collected stories of Brer Rabbit, Jack Tales, and other trickster figures from African American communities, but the origins and roots of many tales are wonderfully tangled. A story might carry African roots, indigenous influence, European motifs, and local plantation humour all at once. Oral tradition loves borrowing clothes. It rarely cares who invented the buttons. You feel the floor beneath you, hard through the thin warmth of the room. The child nearest the hearth has gone limp with sleep, but refuses to surrender fully. One eye stays open in heroic dedication to the rabbit's fate. The storyteller lowers the voice slightly, making everyone lean inward. The rain kindly helps by muting the world outside. Historians still argue over how to interpret the political meaning of certain enslaved folk tales. Some see them as hidden resistance, teaching survival and subtle opposition. Others warn that not every tale should be reduced to protest, since stories also offered pleasure, comfort, humour, and family connection. You feel the truth may not choose only one chair. In this cabin, a story can entertain and sharpen the spirit at the same time. A soft song follows the tale, not immediately, but naturally. One voice hums the first line, and another joins beneath it. The melody is low, rounded, and slow enough to settle into the bones. It may be a spiritual, a lullaby, a work tune softened for night, or a fragment carried from somewhere too far away to name. You do not ask. Some songs deserve privacy. The sound vibrates in the close air. It brushes the smoky rafters and returns gently. The children know parts of it. One mouth moves without sound, practicing the shape. Another child sleeps through the whole thing, which is rude but understandable. Sleep is a powerful critic. The song continues anyway because songs are not offended by tired children. You hear a note bend slightly, full of ache and patience. The melody does not rush toward an ending. It circles, repeats, and deepens. In many enslaved communities, music held religious feeling, social bonding, coded communication, memory, and emotional release. Yet each song depended on context. The same tune might soothe a child, strengthen workers, mourn the dead, or carry hope beneath supervision. The rain lightens, then returns, as though reconsidering its evening plans. It taps above the singing and fills the pauses between lines. The smell of the hearth has changed again, becoming softer as the flames sink lower. Ash settles. Wood breathes heat. The cabin glows red near the floor, while the walls fade into brown darkness. A woman begins to speak of someone not present. Her words are careful and plain. A mother sold south, a brother hired away, a child remembered by a scrap of cloth or a name spoken under the breath. Family separation was one of slavery's deepest wounds, and the domestic slave trade tore kin networks across Mississippi and the wider South. Memory had to work hard where law offered no protection. You feel the room tighten, not dramatically, but with recognition. No one needs the story explained. Absence has its own chair here. Names matter, dates matter, places matter. A river crossing, a trader's road, a plantation name, a face last seen under hot sun. All of these become pieces held in speech because paper may not hold them fairly. The voice keeps them alive for one more night. A child asks where a person went. The answer is gentle, but not falsely certain. Downriver, maybe. Toward Louisiana, maybe. Sold to a place with cane fields, perhaps. The words fall softly, but they are heavy. Rain presses the roof. Firelight shows a hand tightening around cloth, then loosening again. The room does not remain only in sorrow. It cannot. A proverb is offered, dry and sharp, and someone laughs under their breath. Wisdom often arrives wearing old shoes and a crooked smile. Another person adds a memory of a woman who could scold a mule into better manners. The cabin enjoys this image. Even grief makes room for a mule with social problems. You hear the storyteller return to a lighter tale, sensing the children's mood and the adult's need. This skill is not accidental. Keeping a room balanced is an art. Too much sorrow, and sleep becomes impossible. Too much cheer, and truth is insulted. The voice finds the narrow bridge between them, carrying everyone carefully across. Your fingertips rest against the edge of a blanket. The cloth is scratchy, warm where it touches your palm, cool along the fold away from the fire. Sound wraps around you. Rain, low voices, coals shifting, a child breathing through a stuffy nose. The atmosphere is intimate, smoky, and alert. Even calm has ears here. Another song begins, this one more like a lullaby. The words are simple, repeated softly, meant less for meaning than for rocking the mind. You feel your breathing slow. The song does what the roof cannot do perfectly. It seals the room, not against rain or cold, but against loneliness for a little while. You think of how little official history once cared for such nights. Ledgers counted bales, acres, ages, and prices. They rarely counted the saving power of a whispered tale. They did not measure the way a child learned courage from a rabbit, or remembered a grandmother through a song. Yet those things shaped lives with quiet force. The cabin knows what the ledger ignored. The rain becomes gentle again, a fine tapping above the softened voices. One by one, The words fall into longer pauses. The storyteller's final line arrives with a small twist, and the children who remain awake smile into their blankets. The clever creature survives. Of course. It would be poor manners for him not to, after making everyone wait. The room settles around the ending. No applause comes, only a low murmur of approval and the shifting of tired bodies. That is enough. The story has done its work. It has widened the walls, warmed the air, and carried memory through darkness without asking permission from anyone who claimed to own the day. You sit in the red hush of the hearth while the last notes fade. Smoke thins, rain brushes the roof. The cabin feels smaller again, yet not empty. It holds the echo of laughter, names, songs, and clever animals. It holds sorrow, certainly, but also craft, wit, tenderness, and the stubborn human habit of making meaning in the night. You feel the cabin slowly turn towards sleep, not with silence, but with a softer kind of movement. Bodies shift closer to bedding. A blanket is lifted. A child is guided from sitting to lying down, still half inside a dream. The hearth has become a bed of red coals, and its light no longer fills the room. It only touches faces, hands, and the nearest folds of cloth, leaving the corners deep and uncertain. The rain keeps tapping above you, but the sound has changed in your mind. It no longer feels like weather arriving. It feels like weather staying. The roof answers each drop with a small wooden note, and the cabin gathers those notes into a steady hush. You sit very still, listening to the room prepare itself. Sleep is coming, but it does not arrive as a luxury. It comes as a necessity with tired feet. A pallet is spread near the wall. It may be stuffed with straw, corn shucks, moss, or whatever can make the floor less unforgiving. You place your hand on it and feel the uneven filling beneath the cloth. Some places thin, some places bunch under your fingers. Nothing about it promises comfort in the grand sense. Still, after a long day, the body can negotiate with almost any surface. In many enslaved quarters, sleeping arrangements were crowded and practical, shaped by cabin size, family structure, age, and available bedding. Some people slept on rough beds, some on pallets, some on mattresses filled with plant material, and children often shared space wherever warmth allowed. Rest was essential for survival, but the conditions of rest reflected the same inequality that shaped the day. You lower yourself carefully, aware of every knee, blanket, and sleeping child nearby. The floor gives a faint creak beneath your weight. A woman adjusts the edge of a blanket so it covers two children at once. One child resists in sleep, kicking it away with impressive commitment to poor decision-making. The blanket is returned gently. The child loses the argument without waking. The cloth under your cheek smells of smoke, dried grass, and old warmth. It scratches slightly, especially where the weave has roughened from use. Your shoulder finds a hard ridge in the filling. You shift. The ridge follows you, because apparently it has chosen a career in persistence. You settle anyway, because tiredness is a powerful diplomat. It persuades the body to accept what the mind would complain about. The cabin's air is warmer near the hearth and cooler along the wall. You feel both at once. One side of your face catches faint heat. Your back senses dampness hidden in the boards. The contrast keeps you awake for a while. Comfort is uneven here, divided like light and shadow. You learn to take warmth where it reaches, without expecting it to explain itself. A small sound comes from the hearth as a coal collapses inward. The glow brightens briefly, then dims. Someone rises to set a protective screen, stone, or careful arrangement near the fire, making certain no spark reaches bedding. Fire is life, but fire is also danger. Cabins built from wood, cloth, and tired judgment cannot afford carelessness. Even sleep must keep one eye open for the flame. The room darkens further. You hear breathing become the main sound beneath the rain. Each person breathes differently. A child whistles faintly through the nose. An older person breathes with a slow catch. Someone turns and sighs, then settles. The cabin becomes a map of unseen bodies, known by rhythm. In a room without privacy, breath itself becomes familiar. A mainstream historical fact rests in that darkness. Enslaved people's sleep was often shortened by long work days, domestic chores, illness, childbirth, childcare, religious gatherings, resistance, fear, and the demands of enslavers. Rest did not stand apart from slavery. It was shaped by it. Even the hours meant for recovery could be interrupted by calls, punishments, emergencies, or the needs of those one loved. You listen for sounds beyond the cabin. Rain makes distance difficult. It blurs footsteps, softens animal movement, and hides the small noises of the yard. That might bring comfort, but it also brings uncertainty. A wet night can feel protective one moment and suspicious the next. You lie still, learning why people in such places could sleep lightly even when exhausted. The door is closed, but not forgotten. Its outline is barely visible in the dimness. You can smell the damp air that seeps around it. The bar or latch holds, though no door here represents complete control. Movement on a plantation is always watched, regulated, and threatened. The fact that the door stands between you and the storm does not mean it stands between you and power, somewhere nearby. A baby stirs. The sound is small, almost swallowed by rain, but an adult wakes instantly. The body of a caregiver hears what others miss. A blanket rustles, a whisper follows. The baby is lifted, soothed, perhaps fed, perhaps rocked against a shoulder. The motion is slow and practiced. Sleep breaks and reforms around this tiny need. A smell of milk, smoke, and damp cloth passes near you. The baby quiets. The adult remains awake longer, listening to be sure. Such moments rarely appear in plantation ledgers. Those records might count a child as property, with a number or a price. They do not record the warm hand on a back, the whispered hush, or the exhaustion inside love. The cabin records it differently. A quirky detail belongs to the bedding itself. Corn-shuck mattresses could rustle when someone turned, making little dry whispers beneath the sleeper. Straw might prick through cloth. Spanish moss, where used, needed preparation to remove insects and roughness. So yes, even a mattress could have an opinion. Some opinions were louder than others, especially when everyone was trying to sleep. You shift again and hear the bedding answer. The sound is small but embarrassing in the quiet. No one comments. Everyone has made a mattress complain at some point. The rain kindly covers your offence. You breathe out slowly and let the darkness settle over your eyes. Sleep approaches from the edges first, softening the wall, the roof, and the red line of the hearth. Historians still argue whether enslaved people's nighttime hours should be understood mainly as stolen personal time, enforced recovery for labour, or a fragile mixture of both. Some emphasise community, worship, courtship, and family life after dark. Others stress exhaustion, surveillance, and the body's desperate need to repair itself. You feel that mixture in your bones. The night is not one thing, it is contested ground. A murmur rises from someone half asleep, perhaps a prayer or a dream fragment. The words dissolve before you can catch them. The sound leaves behind a feeling rather than a message. Around the room, people lie in careful arrangements made by habit. Adults shield children from drafts. Older bodies claim places where they can rise without stepping on anyone. Space is scarce, but it is thoughtfully managed. Rain slides down the outer wall. You can hear it gathering, then falling in a heavier stream from one edge of the roof. The drop lands again and again in the same place outside, making a hollow splash in mud. Your mind begins to count it. 1, 2, 3. Then you lose the number. Counting rain is an ancient bedtime mistake. It always wins. The blanket over you is thin, but it grows warmer with your own breath and body heat. Its fibers scratch your wrist when you tuck your hand beneath your chin. You can feel the worn places, softer from use, and the thicker seams where repairs have made the cloth uneven. The blanket is not generous. It is loyal, which may be more useful tonight. A sleeper near you turns, and a foot brushes your ankle. The contact is brief and startling. Then it is ordinary. Crowding changes the meaning of touch. A hand, elbow, shoulder, or foot may cross into your space because space itself is a rare creature. Annoyance exists, certainly. So does comfort. Human warmth becomes part of the bedding. You hear insects faintly when the rain eases. They sing from the damp edges of the yard, then disappear beneath another soft rush of water. The cabin smells cooler now. The fire is fading, and smoke has settled into the roof beams. Your mouth tastes faintly of ash. You swallow and turn your cheek to a less scratchy patch of cloth, which feels like a victory worthy of no parade. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow at first. Sounds still reach you. A coal settling, a child sighing, rain shifting direction, someone scratching at a mosquito bite. The whole room breathes inside your half-dreams. You do not fall away from the cabin. You sink deeper into it, held by discomfort, warmth, closeness, and the steady insistence of weather. The darkness is not empty. It has layers. Near the hearth, it is red and soft. Near the wall, it is blue and cold. Near the roof, it is smoky and thick. You sense the shape of rafters above, though you cannot see them clearly. You sense the door, the pot, the folded clothes, the bodies around you. The room remains present even after your eyes close. A distant sound breaks through the rain, perhaps an animal shifting in a shed or a branch falling under water weight. Your body tightens before thought explains it. Others may wake too, though nobody speaks. Then the sound passes, and the room relaxes one breath at a time. Sleep here is communal even in interruption. Fear can move through a room like a draught. You return to the rain. It is easier to trust because it repeats itself, drop after drop, soft and steady. The roof gathers the sound and gives it back. You imagine water tracing the outside walls, finding every seam, testing every repair. Inside, people test another kind of repair, the daily mending of strength through rest. Neither repair is perfect. Both are necessary. Your muscles grow heavier. The hard ridge beneath your shoulder becomes less important. The scratch of cloth fades. Even the smoke seems softer. The mind loosens its grip on the room, then takes hold again when a child coughs. A hand pats the child's back in darkness. The cough passes. Silence returns, not complete, but kind enough. You drift near sleep while the cabin holds its uneasy warmth. No one owns the night completely. Not the rain, not the fire, not the rules outside, not even exhaustion. Yet for these quiet breaths, rest gathers where it can. It gathers under thin blankets, beside fading coals, in the careful spaces between bodies. It gathers in the sound of rain on a roof that leaks, shelters, complains, and still keeps falling water from your face. You wake into darkness that has thinned but not disappeared. The cabin is still mostly shadow, yet the night has lost some of its weight. Rain continues above you, softer now, as though the storm has grown tired of its own conversation. The roof gives back a slow tapping, uneven and patient. Somewhere outside, water drops from an eave into a puddle, then another puddle, then another, because apparently the yard has become a committee of puddles. Your body knows morning before your eyes do. The floor feels colder beneath the bedding. The air has sharpened around your face. Your shoulder aches from the hard place beneath you, and one hip complains with the honesty of a witness under a oath. You shift carefully, trying not to wake the child curled near your feet. The child has managed to claim more space during sleep than any reasonable person should possess. A faint grey line appears near the door. It is not sunrise yet, not properly. It is only the first rumour of day pressing through rain and cloud. The hearth has faded to a dull glow beneath the ash. The cabin smells different in this hour. Smoke is older, less lively. Damp cloth has cooled. Wet earth breathes through every gap, carrying the mineral scent of mud and the sour sweetness of soaked vegetation. People begin waking in layers. One person coughs quietly, then lies still again. Another sits up with slow effort, rubbing the face with both hands. A woman reaches for a child without looking, checking warmth beneath a blanket. Someone near the wall whispers a word that might be prayer, complaint, or both. The room does not spring awake. It rises carefully, like a tired animal testing its legs. On a cotton plantation in Mississippi, the workday often began very early, especially during busy seasons when daylight itself was treated as a resource to be spent. Enslaved labourers could be called to the fields before full sunrise, with tasks directed by the season, weather, overseers, and the demands of cotton cultivation. Morning was not gentle simply because rain made it beautiful. You hear movement outside. A door opens from another cabin, and the sound reaches you through the wet air. Feet step into mud with a soft sucking noise. A voice speaks low, then fades beneath the rain. The plantation is beginning to stir. Not loudly, not yet. But the quiet has changed from resting quiet to working quiet, which is a very different creature. You sit up and feel chills slide under the blanket. The air touches the damp places in your clothing and makes your skin tighten. Your fingers are stiff. You rub them together, listening to the scratch of dry skin. The room's warmth has retreated close to the ashes, and everyone must begin again the small negotiations with cold, wet, time, and fatigue. A person kneels at the hearth and coaxes life from the coals. The motion is practiced and delicate. Ash is shifted aside. A coal glows red, then brighter as breath feeds it. A twist of dry fibre or shaving catches at last. Smoke rises first, then flame. The smell of new fire moves through the cabin, sharp and hopeful. It is not much, but it changes everything. The first light shows details the night softened. Mud on the threshold has dried at the edges and stayed wet in the middle. A bowl under the leak holds rainwater with ash flecks floating on top. A blanket lies twisted around two sleeping children who have somehow formed a knot. The walls look greyer, poorer, more tired. Daylight can be rather rude with its honesty. A quirky morning detail sits beside the hearth. Ash from the fire is not just waste. Wood ash could be used in soap making, cleaning, gardening, and other household tasks when mixed or handled in particular ways. In a cabin where resources are stretched, even yesterday's fire has another job. History has a talent for making humble leftovers seem busy. Someone pours water into a cup and drinks. The swallow is audible in the quiet. Another person splashes a little water over the face, gasping softly at the cold. There is no leisurely washing here, no basin steaming beside a polished mirror. There is water, cloth, chill, and necessity. Clean enough for the morning becomes the practical aim. Perfection, wisely, stays out of the way. The rain has changed the plantation yard into slick clay. You picture the path between cabins shining in the dimness, with footprints already filling slowly at the edges. Mud will cling to hems, shoes, ankles, and tools. It will make lifting harder and walking slower. It will carry the field into the cabin again when the day returns. Mud is persistent. One almost respects it, if one is feeling generous. A child wakes and begins to cry, not loudly, but with the offended sadness of someone dragged from warmth into a cold world. A hand rubs the child's back. Another hand finds a scrap of bread or a small bite saved for morning. The child quiets enough to chew. The room makes space for this tiny breakfast. though time is already tightening around everyone. Food in the morning is quick, a leftover piece of cornbread, a sip of water, perhaps something warmed if there is fuel and time. The body wants more, but the day does not ask politely what the body wants. You feel hunger as a hollow awareness beneath the ribs. It is not sharp yet. It is only present, waiting with excellent patience and poor manners. Someone steps outside and returns with the smell of rain on their shoulders. The cold air enters behind them, and the fire trembles. They speak of the yard, the puddles, and the field road. The words are ordinary, but worry sits under them. Rain might delay certain tasks, but it might also make overseers impatient, animals difficult, and work more miserable when it cannot be delayed. Weather is never neutral here. Historians still argue how often heavy rain truly interrupted cotton labour on plantations. Some plantation records suggest fieldwork shifted with weather, seasons, and crop needs. Other accounts show enslaved people were often forced to work through cold, heat, dampness, and exhaustion when enslavers demanded it. The cabin does not settle that debate. It only holds people listening to rain and wondering what will be required. The fire begins to warm your hands, so you hold them out, palms open, letting heat return slowly to the knuckles. Your fingers sting as feeling comes back. That sting is familiar. The little pain of returning warmth. The smell of smoke grows stronger, mixing with wet wool and morning breath. The cabin seems both alive and reluctant, as if it too would prefer another hour beneath the blanket. A man near the door checks a tool handle by touch. The wood is damp but usable. He rubs it with a cloth, then sets it upright where it will not fall. Tools are not merely objects waiting for work. They are extensions of bodies, burdens for hands already worn. A broken handle can cost time. Lost time can bring punishment. The practical details of mourning are full of hidden pressure. A woman braids a child's hair with quick tenderness. Her fingers move faster than the child's patience. The child winces once, then submits with sleepy dignity. Hair must be kept from tangling, from catching, from becoming another problem in a day already crowded with them. The braid is neat, firm, and made in poor light. That is skill, even if nobody writes it down. The grey at the door grows wider. Rain clouds hide the sun. But morning insists. Outside, animals stir. You hear a mule snort, a distant hinge creak, water splashing beneath footsteps. Somewhere farther off, a human voice calls with more authority than kindness. The sound travels through the rain and settles into the room. Shoulders tighten, conversation thins. Plantation mornings often involved roll calls, task assignments, movement to fields, or other routines depending on management style. Some plantations used gang labour in cotton fields, where groups worked under overseers or drivers. Other tasks were divided by age, strength, gender, skill, and season. The day shape could vary, but the lack of freedom did not. That is the hard centre. You feel the atmosphere shift from domestic closeness to outward readiness. Blankets are folded or pushed aside. A child's face is wiped with a thumb. Someone ties a cloth around the head. Another person checks the hem of a garment, then gives up on making it drier. Dampness has won this round. It celebrates quietly in the fabric. The cabin's warmth is now working against time. The fire has finally grown pleasant, which is exactly when people must leave it. This seems deeply unfair, and the fire has the nerve to look innocent. You notice how everyone takes a little heat while they can. A hand held close. A back turned briefly toward the hearth. A child positioned near the glow until the last possible moment. You look toward the doorway as it opens again. The yard beyond is pale and wet. Rain dots the surface of puddles, making rings that overlap and vanish. The smell outside is strong, full of clay, manure, wet wood, and crushed leaves. Cold air reaches your face and clears the smoke from your throat. It feels clean for one breath, then harsh. A person steps out and tests the mud with one foot. The ground yields immediately, The sound is soft, almost comic, except nothing about a cold, wet walk toward forced labour is truly funny. Still, someone mutters that the mud seems determined to keep company. Another answers that at least mud is loyal. A low smile passes through the doorway and disappears. You remain inside for a final moment, feeling the pull between warmth and obligation. The cabin has sheltered the night, but it cannot keep the morning from entering. The rain has made the world softer to the eye and harder to move through. Every path is slick. Every hem will darken. Every footstep will carry weight. A child clings briefly to an adult's skirt or trouser leg. The adult bends and speaks close to the ear. The words are too soft to hear, but the tone is steady. Reassurance has to be quick. Love must fit into the narrow spaces left by command. The child lets go, though not happily. Children are very honest critics of mourning. The fire is banked as safely as possible. Coals are arranged so they may last or be revived. Bedding is set away from sparks. The bowl of leak water is carried outside and emptied into a yard already far beyond caring. A final glance moves around the room, checking what must be protected from damp, animals, or accident. Leaving a cabin is also an act of trust. You rise and feel stiffness travel through your legs. The first step is awkward. The second is better. Your body is not fully rested. But the day does not require fullness. It requires obedience, endurance, and motion. Outside. The rain continues with gentle indifference. It falls on cabins, fields, animals, tools, and the big house alike, though not on equal lives. At the threshold, you pause. The warm air behind you smells of smoke and sleep. The air ahead smells of mud and command. Rain touches your face as soon as you lean out. It is cool, almost tender, and completely unaware of history. You step into the yard and the mud receives you with a soft pull. Morning has begun, wet and grey, while the cabin glows faintly behind you like a memory of heat. You notice the small things first, because the small things know how to hide in plain sight. A folded scrap of cloth rests beneath a cup. A smooth stone sits near the hearth, too deliberately placed to be accidental. A bit of ribbon, faded almost beyond colour, has been tucked into a crack between boards. None of these objects would impress a wealthy visitor. That is fortunate, really. Impressive things attract greedy eyes. The cabin holds a private inventory that no plantation ledger fully understands. A shell from a distant place, a bead saved from a broken string, a button with no matching garment, a spoon worn thin along one side. Each item seems ordinary until you imagine the effort required to keep it. In a world where people are denied ownership of themselves, a tiny possession can carry surprising weight. Your fingers hover over the edge of a small wooden box, though you do not open it. The wood is plain, darkened by smoke and touch. Its lid fits tightly enough to protect whatever rests inside from dust, insects, and curious children, those famous investigators of forbidden things. You sense that the box is not valuable because of what a market would pay. It is valuable because someone decided it mattered. On many plantations, enslaved people created personal and family spaces within narrow limits, using belongings, foodways, clothing choices, religious items, and cabin arrangements to express identity. These acts did not cancel the violence of slavery. They did something quieter and still important. They marked the difference between being treated as property and living as a person with memory, taste, skill, preference, and will. You see a row of pegs along the wall. A headcloth hangs from one, folded with care. Beside it hangs a small bag made from rough cloth, tied with string. The bag may hold seeds, herbs, sewing things, a charm, tobacco, a coin, or something too personal to name. The mystery itself feels respectful. Not everything in history needs to be opened for inspection. The rain outside has softened the yard, but behind the cabin, a small patch of earth still holds its shape. You step near the doorway and look into the grey light. A garden plot lies beyond the drip line, dark with water, its rows low and humble. The soil is raised slightly where hands have worked it. Perhaps there are collards, beans, onions, sweet potatoes, peppers, or medicinal plants. The rain beads on leaves like tiny lamps. Garden plots could be crucial to enslaved families in Mississippi and across the South. When allowed, people use them to supplement rations, feed children, preserve favoured plants, and sometimes trade surplus produce or poultry. Such gardens were often tended during scarce personal time. The soil may look quiet, but it holds extra calories, old knowledge, and a little bargaining power. Not bad for mud with ambition. You smell wet leaves and turned earth through the open door. The scent is clean, sharp, and alive. It slips into the smoky cabin and changes the air for a moment. Someone steps out with a small hoe or stick and nudges water away from a tender row. The motion is quick, practical, and protective. A plant can drown in kindness from the sky. Even rain must be managed. A quirky tidbit lives among those garden rows. Enslaved gardeners sometimes grew plants that plantation owners did not fully value or recognize, including herbs used for seasoning, healing, or spiritual purposes. Seeds could travel in pockets, hair, hems, gourds, or memory. A seed is a very quiet traveller. It crosses borders without making speeches, then waits for the right hands. Inside, a woman checks a bundle of dried leaves tied above the hearth. She crumbles one between her fingers and smells it. The scent is bitter, green, and smoky from hanging there too long. It might flavour food, treat a cough, repel insects, or serve a purpose known only within the household. Knowledge like this often moved through women, elders, healers, and careful observation. It did not need a printed label to be precise. Historians still argue how much African medical and spiritual knowledge survived intact within enslaved communities, and how much was transformed by American landscapes and forced displacement. Some practices show clear continuities, while others blend African, indigenous, European, and local experimentation. You feel that uncertainty not as confusion, but as richness. Survival rarely keeps clean borders. It gathers what works. A small mark has been scratched near the doorway. It might be accidental, a child's line, a tally, a protective sign, or simply damage from a tool. You cannot know. The not knowing matters. Scholars study archaeological remains from slave quarters and sometimes find beads, pierced coins, shells, pins, ceramics, and hidden deposits that may suggest adornment, spirituality, play, trade, or household life. Objects whisper, but they do not always explain themselves. You return your attention to the cabin's interior. A piece of broken mirror, no larger than 2 fingers, catches the firelight. It gives back a sliver of face, eye, and flame. A mirror fragment can help with grooming, shaving, tying a head cloth, or checking a wound. It can also be slightly magical in feeling resist, because it proves the self is still visible. That is not a small proof here. Someone smooths a garment over the knees and examines a patch sewn from different cloth. The patch is practical, but its placement shows care. A contrasting fabric forms a small square of personality on an otherwise worn garment. Clothing issued to enslaved people was often coarse, limited, and controlled, but people altered, repaired, traded, and personalized what they could. Style does not vanish just because power disapproves of it. A young person ties a strip of cloth around the wrist, perhaps to protect the skin, perhaps to remember someone, perhaps simply because it feels right. The knot is neat. The gesture is quick. You sense how personal expression must sometimes become small enough to pass unnoticed. A bright ribbon, a careful braid, a preferred way of wrapping cloth. These can be quiet declarations. They say, "I am here," without asking anyone to approve. The rain makes the garden smell stronger. Water runs along little furrows and gathers near the edge of the plot. A child is sent to move a gourd or broken vessel catching water. The child goes barefoot, stepping with exaggerated care through mud. There nearly slips anyway. A laugh rises from the doorway. The child scowls with great dignity, because nothing is more serious than being laughed at by family while covered in mud. Near the cabin, a chicken scratches beneath a raised edge of wood, offended by the rain but committed to investigation. Some enslaved families kept chickens or other small animals when permitted, and these could provide eggs, meat, trade goods, or small income. Permission could be withdrawn, animals could be taken, and conditions varied sharply. Still, a hen wandering through a wet yard can represent more than breakfast. She can represent strategy with feathers. You hear the soft cluck outside and smell wet feathers when the bird comes too near the doorway. Someone shoos it away without much conviction. The bird ignores the instruction for 3 seconds, which seems about right for a chicken. Then it darts back toward shelter. Even the smallest creatures know where warmth lives. On a shelf, a small clay pipe rests beside a twist of tobacco. Tobacco could be used for smoking, trade, social exchange, and moments of pause, though access varied. You imagine someone holding the pipe at night, drawing in smoke while listening to rain and conversation. The scent would mingle with hearth smoke until the cabin carried another layer of human habit. A pipe is not only a pipe. Sometimes it is 5 minutes of being left alone. A carved object lies near the wall, perhaps a child's toy, a tool handle, or a charm. The cuts are uneven but intentional. Woodworking skill could appear in furniture, spoons, handles, toys, traps, baskets, and repairs. Many enslaved people possess specialized skills that plantations exploited while rarely honoring the makers. Inside the cabin, however, a carved toy might be valued simply because a child smiles at it. That may be the better review. You touch the atmosphere of the room with your senses. Smoke roughens the air, damp wool cools it, wet soil sweetens it from the doorway. The warmth of the hearth brushes the backs of your hands. The rain hushes the wider plantation, giving these little objects a chance to seem louder. They do not shout, they insist quietly. A memory is attached to almost everything. The ribbon may have belonged to a sister. The bead may have been traded from another plantation. The herb bundle may come from a grandmother's instruction. The seed may have been saved from a better harvest. The spoon may have been carved during a winter evening. Memory lives not only in speech, it hides inside use. You notice a small patch of swept floor where children play when weather keeps them near the cabin. A few pebbles, nutshells, or seeds might become pieces in a game. Children everywhere are experts at converting almost nothing into entertainment. Under slavery, play existed within danger, work, and restriction, yet it still existed. That fact is simple and somehow enormous. Historians continue to question how much autonomy enslaved people could exercise through personal property, garden produce, and informal trade. Some plantation owners allowed limited markets because it benefited plantation management. Enslaved people used those openings for food, clothing, tools, savings, social contact, and self-respect. The result was not freedom, but it was not nothing. The difference matters. You step closer to the garden again and watch rain tremble on leaves. The plants bend but do not break. Their roots hold in dark soil, drinking what the night gives while enduring what the day demands. You understand why a person might care for them with unusual tenderness. A garden answers labour with growth. That is a kinder bargain than cotton ever offers. Inside, the small box remains closed. The ribbon stays tucked away. The pipe rests on the shelf. The carved object waits near the wall. Nothing dramatic happens. No trumpet announces dignity. No grand speech fills the cabin. Instead, a hand straightens a cloth bag. A child pockets a smooth stone. Someone checks the garden from the doorway with satisfied eyes. These are hidden comforts, but they are not trivial comforts. They make the room more than a signed shelter. They make the body more than a field hand. They make memory portable, taste personal, and care visible. The plantation may organise land and labour, but inside these small choices, people organise meaning. The rain continues over the roof and across the garden rows. You breathe in smoke, wet leaves, clay, and faint herbs drying above the hearth. The cabin feels crowded with quiet possessions, some seen, some hidden, some carried only in memory. Around you, dignity does not roar. It folds cloth, saves seeds, tends plants, keeps a bead, warms hands, and refuses to disappear. You stand near the doorway and watch the rain stitch silver lines through the dim morning air. The yard has become a map of puddles, footprints, and small streams. Water slips along the path between cabins, gathers beside a stump, then slides toward the lower ground beyond the quarters. The sound is soft but constant, 1,000 tiny movements finding the easiest way downhill. Rain may look gentle from shelter, but it has a busy mind. Beyond the yard, the cotton fields lie under a grey veil. The rows are not crisp in this weather. They blur into wet earth, pale stalks, and dark furrows, stretching farther than the eye wants to follow. You can smell the field before you reach it. Mud, leaves, manure, wet wood, and the faint sourness of standing water rise together. The air presses cool against your face, and your clothing begins accepting dampness immediately, because fabric has poor boundaries. Weather matters here in practical ways. Cotton cultivation in Mississippi depended on timing, soil conditions, planting, chopping weeds, tending plants, and later picking when bolls opened. Too much rain could delay fieldwork, encourage weeds, damage roads, slow transportation, or threaten crops at vulnerable moments. Too little rain could bring its own trouble. The plantation talks about weather, because weather talks back through money, hunger, and labour. You hear footsteps behind you. Careful and reluctant, people move out into the yard with tools, cloth wraps, and shoulders already set against the day. A child stays close to an older person, stepping where the mud looks firmer. This strategy works for 3 steps, then fails completely. The child's foot sinks with a wet sound, and someone mutters that Mississippi mud has manners like a landlord. Nobody seems shocked. A distant figure crosses near the work buildings. The posture is watchful, not hurried. On many plantations, overseers, drivers, or enslavers monitored labour, enforced discipline, and decided how work continued in bad weather. Rain could soften some demands, but it could also sharpen impatience. A day lost to weather might become a day made up later. Water falling from the sky does not necessarily fall as mercy. You feel that watchfulness even before anyone speaks. It lives in the way voices lower when a certain person appears. It lives in the speed with which tools are lifted. It lives in the glance toward the road, the barns, the fields, the big house. The plantation is arranged so that people are seen. Cabins, yards, paths, and fields all belong to a system of looking. Even rain cannot fully blur it. The rain thickens again, rattling on leaves and roofs. Drops strike puddles with small crowns that vanish instantly. You step forward, and mud grips your shoe with theatrical commitment. The pull is slow, sticky, and faintly insulting. Each step takes more effort than it should. Mud adds labour without ever appearing on a task list. Very clever of it. Very rude. At the field edge, the soil looks heavy and bruised. Cotton plants can endure some wetness, but timing is everything. In the growing season, rain can help young plants or complicate weeding. During harvest, wet cotton can be difficult to pick, store, and transport properly. Plantation records often noted weather because it affected output. For enslaved workers, weather affected bodies first, then everything else. You hear water drip from a hat brim. You feel cold running down the back of a neck. Damp cloth clings at the elbows and knees. The smell of wet cotton plants is green, earthy, and faintly bitter. The roos narrow your path, guiding you into repetition before work even begins. Rain changes the sound of the field. Instead of dry rustle and insect hum, there is splash, suck, drip, and breath. A mainstream historical fact stands plainly in this wet field. By 1850, cotton was central to Mississippi's economy, and enslaved labor formed the foundation of that system. Large plantations depended on organized field gangs and intense seasonal labor, especially during planting, weeding, and picking periods. Wealth measured in cotton bales rested on human beings forced into exhausting routines. The rain falls over that truth without softening it. A quirky detail appears in the practical anxiety of planters. Some plantation journals treated weather almost like an unreliable employee, recording rain, frost, heat, pests, river levels, and crop prospects with remarkable irritation. The sky could not be whipped, fined, or lectured, which must have been deeply frustrating for men accustomed to command. Clouds, inconveniently, do not respect plantation hierarchy. You feel a small flicker of satisfaction in that thought, though it is quickly folded away. The rain may inconvenience the powerful, but the burden often lands below. If roads wash out, people repair them. If weeds surge after rain, people chop them. If cotton must be gathered quickly between storms, the people hurry. Weather may trouble the owner's accounts, yet it troubles the worker's muscles, skin, lungs, and sleep. Historians still argue how enslaved people interpreted bad weather in relation to labor and resistance. Some accounts suggest storms could create opportunities for rest, delay, movement, worship, or escape. Others show that harsh weather often increased suffering and surveillance, especially when enslavers feared disorder. The meaning of rain was never simple. You can feel that uncertainty in the field's wet silence. A call comes from farther down the line. People turn slightly, listening. The decision may be to wait, to move to another task, to repair drainage, to tend animals, to haul wood, to clear something damaged by wind, or to begin field work despite the rain. Plantation labor rarely vanishes because one task becomes impossible. It usually changes shape. Work is very good at finding another door. The storm presses low over the land. Trees at the field edge drip steadily, their trunks black with water. A crow lifts from a branch and beats its wings heavily into the grey air. The sound is awkward, almost annoyed. You understand. Everything seems heavier when wet. Even birds appear to resent the management decisions of clouds. Someone bends to examine the soil. Fingers press into mud, testing whether the ground can take footsteps and tools. The earth sticks beneath the nails. It smells rich, metallic, and alive. Soil is not passive here. It can hold water too long, crust under sun, drain poorly, or cling to roots. Cotton wealth required constant attention to land, yet the land was never fully obedient. It had its own ancient opinions. Nearby, a ditch carries water along the edge of a field. Drainage ditches, raised beds, field slopes, and road maintenance could all matter on plantations where heavy rain affected crops and movement. Enslaved labourers often performed the hard physical work of shaping fields, clearing land, digging ditches, and maintaining paths. The neat lines of agriculture were made by bodies, not by the tidy imagination of maps. Rain runs down your sleeve and gathers at the wrist. You shake your hand once, and droplets fly away. Your palm feels cold and gritty. A person beside you adjusts a head wrap, pulling fabric tighter against the wet. Another shifts weight from one foot to the other, conserving energy while waiting for orders. Waiting is its own labour when the body is tense and the day is uncertain. The field smells stronger as rain disturbs the surface. Earthworms appear in slick patches. Grass at the margins bends under water. A broken cotton stalk lies partly buried in mud. You notice how the plantation's usual appearance of order is softened. Straight lines remain, but they blur. Edges dissolve. The storm shows that control is always partly illusion. Nature is not impressed by bookkeeping, yet human control returns quickly through voices. A command carries across the wet rows, flat and practical. People begin moving. Some turn toward a shed, some toward a field road, some toward a line where water must be cleared. The day rearranges itself around the rain. No one looks surprised. Flexibility belongs most to those with the least power, which is one of history's more exhausting jokes. You step along the field road, where puddles reflect the pale sky. Wagon ruts are filled with brown water. If cotton must later move toward river landings or markets, roads matter greatly. Mississippi's cotton economy connected plantations to rivers, steamboats, merchants, creditors, and distant textile mills. But every grand chain begins with mud under someone's feet. Commerce has always preferred not to mention that part. A mule stands beneath a crude shelter, ears angled backward with philosophical gloom. The animal smells of wet hide, hay, and manure. It shifts and stamps, making the boards beneath it thud. Animals were part of plantation work, hauling, ploughing, carrying, grinding, and transporting. They also suffered in weather and needed tending. A rainy day may move labour from cotton rows to stables, barns, fences, and roads. Someone checks a harness strap for rot or weakness. Leather darkens in rain and grows stiff later if poorly dried. A broken strap can delay work and invite blame. The hands examining it are quick, knowledgeable, and careful. Skilled labour appears everywhere on a plantation. Though the system often pretends only owners possess intelligence, the strap knows better. So does the mule, probably. Wind shifts, and rain blows sideways for several moments. It touches your cheek coldly, slips under your collar, and makes everyone turn slightly away. The atmosphere grows more alert. Storms can bring falling branches, swollen creeks, damaged roofs, sick animals, and feverish damp that lingers in cabins. Rain on the roof may soothe at night, but rain across a plantation carries a list of consequences. You think of illness in such damp conditions. Wet clothing, poor shelter, mosquitoes, contaminated water, and exhaustion could deepen vulnerability. Medical care for enslaved people was often inadequate, controlled by enslavers, and shaped by labour value rather than human dignity. People relied on household knowledge, community care, and whatever treatment could be obtained. Weather entered health through skin, lungs, water, and insects. Another uncertain debate lives here. Scholars continue to examine plantation health records, narratives, and archaeological evidence to understand how environment shaped disease among enslaved communities. Some sources emphasize epidemics and poor sanitation, while others highlight the skill of enslaved healers and family caregivers. Both matter. Suffering and knowledge existed together, often in the same wet room, over the same tired body. The rain begins to ease. Not stop. Just ease. The drops grow finer, more like mist falling with confidence. Voices carry farther now. You hear a gate creak, a bucket strike wood, and someone calling for a tool. The plantation's machinery of labour resumes its sharper outline. Mud remains, damp remains, watchfulness remains. Only the sound has changed. You notice how quickly the world prepares to treat the storm as an interruption rather than a force. People will speak of lost time, damaged rows, delayed hauling, or work postponed. Yet for you, standing in the wet air, the rain has revealed something deeper. It has shown how fragile every plan is, and how strongly the system depends on making vulnerable people absorb that fragility. The field holds its breath under grey light. Cotton plants shine with water. Ditches murmur. A mule snorts in damp irritation. Human figures move between cabins, sheds, and rows, each carrying a task shaped by weather and command. The rain has not washed the plantation clean. It has made its workings more visible, turning power, labour, soil, and uncertainty into one cold scent rising from the mud. You stand with water on your sleeves and clay heavy at your feet. The roof's soft music is farther away now, replaced by the open sounds of a wet plantation waking fully. Somewhere behind you, a cabin still holds warmth in its coals. Ahead, the fields wait beneath mist. Rain continues lightly over everything, gentle to hear, hard to live through, and impossible to command. You return to the cabin in the hour when rain begins to lose its certainty. It no longer strikes the roof with steady insistence. It pauses, gathers, and falls again in the lighter touches, as if the clouds are growing sleepy too. The sound becomes delicate above you, a thin tapping over the darker breath of the hearth. The room is still warm near the coals, though the corners hold their familiar chill. You stand just inside the doorway and let your eyes adjust to the dim amber light. The cabin does not look grand, and it never pretended to. Its boards are rough, its seams imperfect, its roof tired from a long wet night. Yet the place has done something important. It has held bodies, smoke, breath, worry, food, memory, and the smallest sparks of comfort against weather and power. A faint mist hangs outside, blurring the yard and softening every edge. The mud shines under the grey sky. Footprints fill with water, then lose their shape. The garden rows behind the cabin are dark and low, drinking what they can. The air smells of wet clay, wood smoke, ash, and leaves washed clean by rain. You breathe it slowly, and it feels cooler than the room around your shoulders. Inside, the fire needs only a little tending. A hand moves the ash aside and finds a coal still glowing. Dry kindling is added with care, and the flame lifts, small and orange. The sound is almost shy at first. Then the wood catches, and a gentle crackle returns to the room. Warmth creeps outward along the floor, not quickly, but faithfully. A mainstream historical fact rests quietly in this glow. By 1850, Mississippi's cotton plantations were part of a vast system tied to land, credit, river trade, textile demand, and slavery. The cabins in the quarters were not separate from that system. They were built within it, limited by it, and yet filled by people whose lives exceeded every ledger, map, and sale document that tried to reduce them. You look at the room, as if seeing it through the objects that remain. A pot near the hearth, a blanket folded with care, a stool polished by use, a cup set upside down to keep dust away, a scrap of cloth drying near the warmth. Nothing here is decorative in the empty sense. Each thing has work to do, and each thing has been touched enough to carry memory. The rain fades again, and for a few breaths the roof becomes nearly silent. That quiet feels enormous. You hear the fire better, and the soft shifting of someone seated nearby. You hear a child breathing under a blanket, slow and heavy. You hear water dripping outside from the roof edge, a final patient rhythm. The cabin seems to listen to itself. You run your hand across a beam darkened by smoke. The surface feels dry in places, sticky with old soot in others. Your fingers come away faintly marked. The beam has held heat, rain sound, and years of breath rising in winter and summer. It has watched births, sickness, whispers, quarrels, laughter, and the long exhaustion of ordinary survival. Wood remembers through stain and wear. A quirky little detail waits near the hearth, where a flat stone has been warmed by the fire. Such stones could be used to hold heat, steady a pot, crack nuts, press cloth, or warm cold hands and feet. A stone is not supposed to seem tender, naturally. Yet when warmed in a damp cabin, even a stone may become a small luxury. History is full of objects doing more than their name suggests. You hold the warm stone for a moment. It presses heat into your palms, slow and dense. Unlike flame, it does not flicker. Unlike smoke, it does not wander into your eyes with theatrical cruelty. It simply gives back what it has stored. That quiet giving feels almost like the room itself, gathering heat from brief moments and returning it where possible. Scholars still debate how to describe the emotional life of enslaved domestic spaces without romanticizing hardship or reducing people only to suffering. Some emphasize violence, deprivation, and control. Others also trace kinship, culture, skill, religious practice, and intimate care inside the quarters. You feel the need for both truths. The cabin is neither a cozy myth nor an empty symbol. It is a lived place. The rain begins again, but softly. The roof receives it without surprise. A few drops find old paths along the outer wall, while the patched seams hold where hands have pressed them. The room smells warmer now, as fresh smoke joins the older smoke embedded in everything. A little steam rises from damp cloth near the fire. It twists upward and disappears among the rafters. You notice how dawn approaches without brightness. The sky beyond the door remains grey, but the blackness has thinned. Shapes become clearer in the yard. A fence rail, a tree trunk, a bucket turned on its side, a hen stepping carefully through mud with the offended dignity of a queen crossing poor carpet. The sight is nearly funny, and the room receives it with a small, quiet smile. The plantation beyond the cabin waits under mist. Its fields, roads, buildings, and rules remain in place. Rain has softened their outlines, not their meaning. You feel how fragile this warm room is within that wider world. The fire can be put out. The roof can leak. A family can be separated. A night can be interrupted. Yet for this moment, the cabin gathers its own centre. A person near the hearth rubs tired hands together over the flame. The palms are lined, the knuckles rough, the nails darkened by work and earth. Those hands have lifted, planted, picked, cooked, washed, mended, soothed, carried, and protected. No monument is required to understand their importance. You can see the whole force of a life in the way fingers curl toward heat. You listen as the rain becomes a misty whisper. The sound no longer fills the cabin, it frames it. The fire takes the lead now, speaking in soft cracks and tiny collapses. A child murmurs in sleep, then quiets. Someone folds a cloth once, twice, and lays it aside. The gestures are calm because they must be. Calm can be chosen for a minute, even when peace is not granted. You look toward the garden patch again. The leaves hold rain in trembling beads. Some plants have bent under the storm, but many stand. Their roots are hidden, doing patient work in dark soil. You think of seeds saved through care, planted in small stolen hours, and guarded against weather, animals, and need. A garden is never only a garden. It is appetite, memory, skill, and tomorrow trying to grow. The cabin holds warmth, but it also holds uncertainty. No one inside can know what orders will come, what the weather will do, or how much strength the day will demand. That uncertainty sits quietly beside the fire. It does not need to shout. It is present in the quick glance toward the door, the careful storing of food, the mending of cloth, and the way every useful thing is placed within reach. You breathe in and feel the room settle around you. Smoke, damp earth, warm ash, wet leaves, and human closeness mingle into one deep atmosphere. The air is not clean in a polished sense, but it is full. It has the weight of use. It carries what has happened here and what may still happen. Every breath feels like a meeting between shelter and exposure. The roof gives one last scatter of rain, then softens again. Water drips outside in slower intervals. The storm is not gone, but it has loosened its grip. Light gathers behind the clouds, pale and cautious. The cabin's interior becomes easier to see. though not brighter exactly. Firelight and dawn share the room, one warm, one grey, each revealing something the other misses. You notice that the cabin is most alive in these transitions. Night to morning, rain to mist, coal to flame, cold to warmth, silence to breath. Such changes are small, but they require attention. People living under force often become experts in attention, because survival depends on reading weather, mood, sound, posture, and chance. Nothing is merely background when safety is uncertain. A final historical uncertainty rests gently here. Researchers continue to piece together daily life in cabins like this from narratives, plantation records, archaeology, letters, and oral tradition. Each source carries limits. Some were written by people in power. Some were remembered through pain. Some were buried in soil. The full truth is larger than any single record, and the quietest lives often require the most careful listening. You stand near the hearth and let the warmth touch your knees. The stone in your hand has cooled a little, but not completely. Outside, rainwater falls from the roof in slow drops. Inside, the coals breathe red beneath the new flame. The room feels fragile, smoky, imperfect, and deeply human. Its warmth does not excuse the world around it. Its warmth simply proves that people kept making life wherever they were forced to stand. You sit down once more and allow the cabin to become very still around you. The rain is almost finished now, but its memory remains on every surface. Mud clings to the threshold. Dampness darkens the wall. Smoke has lowered into the blankets. The garden gleams faintly beyond the doorway. You feel the hour resting between night and day, neither fully one nor the other. Let the sound of the last rain become slower in your mind. Let each drop fall with space around it. One drop from the roof edge, another from a leaf, another from the end of a leaning rail. The world is not silent, but it has softened. Even the mud seems settled, holding footprints gently as if keeping them for a little while. You feel the warmth of the cabin gather close to the floor. It touches ankle, palms, and folded cloth. The fire is small now, steady rather than bright. Its light trembles on the pot, the stool, the wall, and the edge of the blanket. Everything appears simple. Everything has carried so much. The air grows quieter with each breath. Smoke lifts in thin blue threads and fades into the rafters. Outside, mist lies low over the field paths, covering the hard lines of the plantation in grey softness. The cotton rows wait beyond sight. But here, in this small room, your attention rests on ember light, warm hands, and the hush after rain. You do not need to hurry through this last moment. Let the cabin hold you gently, only as an image now. Let the rough boards blur. Let the roof become a distant rhythm. Let the garden leave shine once, then fade. The storm has spent itself. The fire remembers warmth. The morning arrives quietly, with no sharp edge. Your breathing slows. The room softens. The rain becomes a memory of rain, light as fingertips above sleep. You're warm enough. You're still enough. The cabin rests in the grey hush, and the last drop falls from the roof into the waiting earth. Sleep well.